Welcome to another one of Innovation Visual's Digital Marketing Answered podcasts. With this episode, I'm really happy to be joined by Dr. Nicola Headlam. She's currently working freelance on a number of UK projects, which covers culture and the economy, especially a subnational policy. But with over 20 years experience in economic development, she's delivered strategies and evidence-based various spatial scales from local to regional to supranational. And her mission is to use her expertise as an economist and economic development strategist to help people make more informed decisions and achieve better outcomes. Nicola's a thought leader, commentator, and contributor to various different media outlets, podcasts, and publications. So we're really delighted to have Dr. Nicola Headlam on Digital Marketing Answer today. So Nicola, thank you for joining us.
Just have to check I'm not dead. That sounded like an obituary.
No, you're very much alive, very much alive. Really great to have you on. I've known you for some time, but it would be really great to give the people here a bit of background about your professional journey so far.
So, yes, the curriculum vitae never does run smooth, does it? No, certainly not in sort of, I think, anyone interesting. So, yes, I've got more than 20 years experience of economic development strategy. And the thing that basically has really bothered me all my life, which is a bit longer than 20 years now, is why economic phenomena show up differently in different places. It's that simple. So part of that is because I'm the child of a mixed marriage. My mum was from the home counties and my dad's a Geordie. So the difference in terms of going to Newcastle as a kid in the 80s and watching that city change compared to being part of the sort of wider London conurbation, which, spoiler alert, is kind of the motor for the whole of UK PLC. But the ring of towns around London, for me, High Wycombe, Aylesbury, that kind of area, Amersham, didn't have a lot to really pull me in. I found Newcastle far more thrilling with all its kind of contradictions and all its poverty and all its kind of dirty old town connotations. So it was always kind of the question, even as a kid, why are these places so different? And also, why are my families, my northern and southern families, why are they sort of getting such a different rub of the green, as it were, in terms of their aspiration, etc., etc. So without wishing to sort of get all, music swell, I just saw a taste of honey at the Royal Exchange this week. So feeling pretty kind of, kitchen sink dramery about it. The ways in which, privilege and education get wrapped up in space and place is just endlessly fascinating to me. So your access to culture, your access to networks, your access to people, your aspirations, these are things that it's not very fashionable to talk about. We talk a lot about business cases and, starting up and scaling up, but actually both businesses, places and people, we all sort of age and mature in very complex and interesting ways. So I was always drawn to that sort of thick description about place and why things were the way they are, really from a sort of, about the people in a place. So when it came to sort of study, I was always, so I'm basically a kind of sociologist with a strong economic bent, and the blend, of course, between looking at things as social phenomena and looking at things as, what stacks up and what doesn't. It's quite a critical or key skill to be looking for patterns all the time and looking for social forces and sort of what's coming and the next wave. But also what is kind of concerning is that quite often people were very, very used to sort of business case logic and value proposition logics. But sometimes the conversation doesn't really extend to what underpins kind of some of the big why of why things happen, but say both in business, but in places, in politics. I find the sort of creative point at which economic realities hit place, hit people. I found that as interesting now as I did as a kid, wondering why the Metro Centre was very different to Milton Keynes Point, both of which seemed to be something to do with the future, but both of which seemed to be kind of encoding quite a different set of logics in a place. So that's kind of that's kind of the thing that's fascinated me all along, really.
Yeah.
And as soon as I had the chance, I've did a lot of studying, a sort of slightly ostentatious amount with, mentioned got a PhD in kind of
PhD.
urban planning and economic development.
Yeah.
But I've been a slight mongrel, really, because what I genuinely find most interesting is where there's a bit of energy and dynamism, and that can be sometimes within universities, inshallah,
Yeah.
you would hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Sometimes in smaller businesses, sometimes in think tanks.
Yeah.
And so I've sort of been on a bit of a revolving door between all those things sort of the whole time, but
Yeah.
always with a focus on what does this do for people and places? What are the
Yeah.
kind of economic consequences kind of writ large, but also what does that mean practically in terms of what are we going to do about this? How do we bring prosperity to Bradford? How do we
Yeah.
reimagine what might be possible I did a lot of work on European projects when I was an academic. So sort of
Yeah.
slightly restless, change
Yeah.
oriented. And
Yeah.
also what I was thinking about getting prepared for this was that I've always been extremely enthusiastic about the possibilities of social and digital
Yeah.
alongside. So my first tweet, I joined Twitter, gosh, quite early on.
Yeah.
And my first tweet was, there's something important somewhere between a tweet and a thesis. And I really believe that um, being able to be very cogent, very kind of clear
Yeah.
in that kind of noise of social media, but then the much, much deeper analytic side, the books,
Yeah.
the big, big reports and all of that,
Yeah.
we haven't quite got our eye in terms of what we need to make change. It's somewhere between a tweet and a thesis.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of economics. I certainly haven't studied it to the same level as you, but that was what my degree was in. And in terms of understanding marketing and revenue generation and business, underpinning it, as you say, is economics, but also sociology and human behaviors. I mean, what do you think about, do you think that the current crop of business leaders pay enough attention to economics at the moment?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I would have to say some do because, let's be frank, some people pay me a great deal of money to talk to them about it. So, let's, in terms of a business model, working
Yeah.
out why things don't really work and then telling people for a lot of money, it's a growth industry. So kids stay in school, basically.
Mm.
Obviously, I'm being slightly flippant. I find that, so as you said, I do a lot of media at the moment, and it is interesting where the conversation is when you talk to business leaders. Just on the morning of the budget, as I think Nat said to you, we have got a mutual friend,
Yeah.
mentioned
Yeah. Yeah.
a friend of ours, that I'd been doing an outside broadcast with Five Live, and their whole take on budget day was talking to market traders, talking to business owners, very sort of grounded, practical reality. And what we were hearing was very much, you cannot tell people that they're better off than they are at the moment in the current climate. It doesn't matter if you're thinking about your own direct debit and mortgage payments or
Yeah.
overheads on a business. People are feeling, somebody said, in fact, beautiful quote, it's gone beyond the pinch. I've got the foot on my neck now. And that was a small
Oh wow.
business leader.
Yeah, that's a good quote, that one. Yeah.
So in short, I think so forgive me, this might be a bit of a ramble. Did you watch Our Friends in the North when it was out in the 90s?
I didn't know.
Oh, well, that is good telly, believe. So it was a dramatized thing, and it followed some friends from Newcastle through a whole series of life choices and changes. And one of the characters in it does pretty well, sort of, a bit of a likely lad, kind of surfs the sort of horizon.
Yeah.
And he's married to a woman who's very, very active in politics. And he's always like, why are you bothering with all of that? That's not, it's not like good, honest work.
Yeah.
And he finds himself as part of a downturn having to lay somebody off. And the
Yeah.
lad is like, what, why me? Why, what's happening here? And Tosca, who is played by Mark Strong, amazing performance. He
Yeah.
says, it's the Rhodesia question. And the lads looked through like, what's the Rhodesia question? And we used to laugh about that. My dad and I, we kind of really animated something in us, because if you don't understand those kind of global political and economic forces,
Yeah.
it's like if you don't believe in God, God believes in you. That's what they say, don't they, in the evangelical movement. If you don't believe in a wide and broad economic analysis, that stuff is coming for you anyway. So if you don't understand the Rhodesia question, you can still be losing your job on the market at the very coal face of the local economy. And I find it very interesting how the ways in which business leaders particularly, educate themselves and inform themselves, because it's not about just finding a niche and hammering away. Nobody would argue, certainly since the trust budget, etc., that macroeconomic policy didn't have a very direct consequence on you doing your business. So I don't know, I think there is a certain necessary myopia within business to kind of focus hard on your products and services and your offering. But you need somebody looking at the wider horizon, or otherwise you're always going to be subject to those global forces. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that is good. I think it's really that summary that even if you're not paying attention to these things, they're going to come for you anyway.
They'll come for you, exactly. It's the Rhodesia question.
Yes, and I'm sure lots of people listening have no idea that Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe.
Exactly. Right. So but that's the point. Almost that makes the point. It doesn't matter where it is. It's like a foreign war. If that affects your energy bills and your overheads, you better damn well know which foreign war could be kicking off, and what is. So there's been a lot of well, frankly, sort of propaganda about the ways in which the war in Ukraine has affected our energy prices. It's affected them indirectly. We don't buy energy from Ukraine, or there's no kind of link in that way. But if you don't understand that those kind of that wider global turbulence doesn't, and it can affect, again, if you're a small business owner and you want access to finance, the markets at the moment are more risk averse than they've been in years, purely because it feels like the kind of global horizon is cloudier and more difficult. One of the things I talk about a lot in coaching is the VUCA. Do you know about the VUCA?
No, please explain.
So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So if you can be trolling along, you've got the best business in the world, you've got the best customers in the world, nothing's ever going to hurt you. But then a curveball like the global pandemic, a curveball like the consequences of different forms of EU exit, which, by the way, I think it's worth saying it was a disaster. For I think our politicians are quite nervous about this, but Brexit, this economist says 1 star, would not try again. If you're not focused in some senses on the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, that can hit your business, then you're not match fit. You're not really going to be resilient. Who on earth could have imagined that we'd all be, as Danny Dyer would say, home with our trotters up for about 2 years, with the economy having ground to a halt? If you had no resilience in your business to cope with what came, then you don't have a business. So the VUCA is a really interesting way of packaging up all those kind of black swan events, or the maybes, or the big questions. And again, as any form of business lead, anybody that has whose decisions affect other people's lives, a lack of kind of cognizance of the VUCA is kind of a massive black spot.
So it's really interesting, because I know exactly what you mean in terms of that VUCA, although I hadn't used such a cool acronym. In doing our own business planning for looking at revenue predictions for the year, but also helping clients with their revenue planning and things. So if you're a leader in a business and you're trying to navigate this and you're looking at planning, what practical steps can they actually take?
Well, I think the main thing is, you're going to love this. This is such a soundbite. I know that you're kind of very good economics degree we've discussed, but essentially it's communications, isn't it? The business of innovation visual. I read a really good quote the other day, which was, it's not a communication problem we've got, it's a comprehension problem. which I thought was really interesting. It's that business about, it doesn't matter what lines you're putting out there or
Yeah.
what you're trying to communicate. It's what's understood. So that comprehension piece. The main thing is just you need that 360 view of, so they used to call it sort of PESTLE and all those kinds of things, political, economic, social, technical, legal, environmental. And it is just about widening that horizon all the time, thinking to yourself, are there better ways to do this? And PESTLE or PESTLER or whatever, there was other ones that came in. If you're happily kind of in the fast lane selling a bit of whatever, and there's a massive regulatory change, that's your problem, not something that's going to affect your ability to operate, not having foreseen it. That's more or less the definition of business leadership to me. It's having the view, not just, and again, in the kind of current and quite choppy circumstances that we've seen really since the global financial crash in 2008. And let me just be clear, I'm not saying that nothing good has happened since 2008. I'm saying that every pound is very hard won, I would say, in the British economy, in the current context, largely because there's a lot of unpriced VUCA phenomenon floating about that might attach to you. Bad debt in your customers. Do you know your supply chain well enough? Do you know your customer base well enough? Where are there fragilities in that? How do you make your business more anti-fragile, less brittle, more resilient, and all the rest of it? And in a sense, the result of VUCA thinking is to have intelligence-led and adaptive systems that as your normal way of operating. So rather than this is business as usual for us, and then this is what happens when the alarm goes off. The alarm is going off all the time, not least because environmentally there is virtually no business that couldn't be doing more in terms of carbon neutrality, in terms of actually carbon positivity and all of that. I think the main lesson of the recent past is that if your business as usual isn't big enough to kind of embrace or kind of have space for sort of both your best and worst case scenario, then your business as usual isn't your business as usual. That would be my main point. And as a leadership team, so it's not enough to just be best in class at a product or a service. You have to be cognizant and, again, comprehending the wider things that can hit you. And I guess part of that is, and that's because, and if again, this is a slight digression, it's not our friends in the north this time, but something happened in this economy that hasn't gone back. And a lot of people don't kind of operate in this way. You intuitively know it when it's explained. But most of the stuff in the economy, right, is category A business. So you're in communications, I'm an economist, someone else is in data, someone else is in education. You know what I mean? That sector mentality does not help us to understand contemporary economic forces as they hit certainly SMEs. What you need to think about, you've got category A, which is everything that you do, right? So the hiring of your people, the getting of contracts and all the rest of it. Your category B stuff is how you manage your assets. And that is whether you need access to finance to grow, whether you have shareholders, what is the structure, the governance of your business, category B. And as we all know, some businesses, their category B business is driving the business. So the category A work, so for example, and this is going to get a bit political, a water company that has sold in the futures market, essentially revenue lines that it checks that it can't cash, is going to go out of business. And that is allowing its category B function to overrule its category A function, right? So category A is all the things that everybody talks about the economy, right? So what about the effect on hospitality of X, Y, and Z? What about the effect on retail of X, Y, and Z? What unites all businesses from the tiniest to the biggest multinational is how the governance of your assets actually is your business, So in some ways, it's a big call to arms around seeing business. Something that I find really funny is like so much chat about sort of sectors and people are, oh, are you a leader in this sector or that sector?
Yeah.
To me, it's less about that, but much more about that generic skill set. Are you able to price risk? Are you able to work in the VUCA? Are you able to effectively manage the assets of a business of your scale? Are you on top of your data? These aren't sectoral categories. It's not a checklist of like, all he knows is heavy plant machinery, or he knows his fleet, or he knows his shop window. Category B has been wagging the dog since the 80s, really, since the ways in which business, so shareholding and financiarization and recapitalization and all the rest of it. And that's why we get so stuck when we're trying to describe the difference between services and products and goods, because any business, even if it needs a overdraft to tide it over until the next payday, when it's you and your mate, avoiding the Rhodesia question, is involved in the category B of just being in business, the knowledge that you need in order to
governance and management.
So the governance of your access to finance, the governance of your assets, in some ways is the most important skill set. And of course, again, finance directors are very important in any company and all the rest of it. But it's not just that you need to be situationally aware and looking at the broader horizon. You need to be able to tether that to and what, as I say in the People's Republic of Liverpool, which, as you know, is not an English city, and what. So, the Rhodesia question isn't let's look at a map of Rhodesia. It's have a look at what the consequences are of a foreign war on our supply chain. And if the consequences are so critical, it's like having a risk mentality, but also an opportunity mentality, which is able to be capacious enough to understand, again, something very far away that feels very irrelevant can put you out of business. God forbid a monkey or a bat in a Chinese city put us all out of business, or created the biggest pivot that we've ever seen. It certainly not put some people out of business. But this is my point, is that, and really that's what leadership is. It's about being able to connect that broad and as broad as possible situational awareness, because that's also where innovation comes from. So just understanding what your business, what makes what's special, what's your USP and all that. That's not even the entry point really for a successful business. Without this kind of wider situational awareness, without a good strategy for VUCA phenomena, and without kind of that resilience built in as your business as usual, you're not really in business.
No. Interesting. Okay. So there's obviously been a lot of volatility at the moment. And one of the things that marketing and revenue leaders are really getting excited / concerned about is the new developments in generative AI. From an economics viewpoint, such a technological change, what's your opinion on what's happening here?
So I'm pretty positive about technological change and innovation as the motor of bringing in new paradigms, new eras. That's kind of always what happens. In fact, I was listening to an audiobook the other day about the Luddites. I don't know if you know about as good economic students. People smashing up exactly. Being deeply fearful of big changes that are brought by technology is extremely human kind of impulse. I did one of these brilliant memes the other day, which was, I think I missed a meeting. Why is AI doing all the art and poetry and I'm supposed to keep on doing all the work? Like the point is that AI really does by its very nature, by being its non-human intelligence, right? We have to have a conversation about work, about life, about who gets to do what, who gets the benefit. And yes, and I would argue that sort of started off, it's potentially the transformation in terms of generating content. Yourself, Tim, nobody needs to write boilerplate, tedious marketing material. anymore, because you can generate it as well as a bright graduate that you've given everything to and said, I want 600 words back. You know that yourself. Where it starts to get tricky, and this is again back to the what is the human case for AI, is certainly I spend a bit of time reading academic literature and stuff. Like, AI very quickly turns to gobbledygook over a certain expertise and experience level. It doesn't. It will improve obviously in time, but the kind of really fundamental questions of what we should do as a society, I wouldn't have the bots on that. I wouldn't have generative AI. The monkeys typing Shakespeare have not come up yet with a better way to live. But we do need to lean in hard to what is the human, both premium in terms of money. So so again, I would argue that, again, in marketing, why would you be writing boilerplate anyway? You need to have something that's sufficiently targeted and focused and special and all the rest of it in order for it to be a premium service, and that's the human part, because strategizing how to fit it all together, that's the human part. I mean, you tell me if I'm mischaracterizing your business, but again, if you work for somebody and they're just commissioning a lot of generic stuff, you would advise them that probably wasn't the way forward, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that it's the value element and the expertise element, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what generative AI is fundamentally doing. Because it's large language model. It's just churning out words in an order. It's not actually taking all the knowledge in the world and interpreting it, understanding the context of it. And a good description was AI didn't grow up in the world and doesn't understand the context. It's literally stringing words together. And there's so much, so many examples I'm seeing of AI hallucination now, where you ask it a question. Like, somebody was telling me that it asked AI for some legal case law, and the AI came back with it, and they thought, oh, this is great, and then they realized that 2 of the quoted cases were for 2025. So you can see it was made up, because we're not in 2025 yet.
As you say, the what generative AI does is it takes what's out there and it structures something that looks right. But believe me, I've marked undergraduate essays, and there is a relationship between form and understanding, but it's certainly not the whole piece, right? So we've all read AI generated absolute gobbledygook, but also what I think is, what's incredibly helpful is that it helps us. So those machine learning models and all the rest of it, it does, it has triangulated essentially the state of the art in any sort of area, and more or less gives us a baseline. And for me, brilliant. AI leads to base camp. Let's push on. And I'm talking about kind of cognitively, collectively, in terms of what we can imagine, in terms of what we can achieve. That's kind of the optimist's view. I mean, the other thing I've been doing a lot of media on this week, of course, is 25 years of the minimum wage. And of course, these things connect in a very specific set of ways, because with the 11.44 minimum wage, plus your own costs, etc., it basically costs you £30,000 to have anybody on staff full time in this country. Which is fine, because that's still below a living wage in terms of, like, it's very hard to live decently on on the 24k that the 11.44 minimum wage will buy you. But we're at this, imagining a graph under which low paid work and technological improvement are at this kind of crossed kind of tipping point. And that's the conversation that I want to have, right? That's not like, let's dribble AI into the market and see if it gets better at writing boilerplate flaming marketing. It's about if it creates a baseline for us, the kind of potential prize has got to be, the big stuff about what it is to be people, humans in the world. And the more, and I've always been very interested in, because I did cyber psychology actually as an undergraduate, and that was a great module. And thinking through, my husband's quite into his sci-fi, and thinking
Okay.
through the kind of realm of the machines and the realm of something that's logical and
Yeah.
programmable, but then again a space for the other. The most important thing is that being human needs to not be the shadow of being the machine.
Yeah.
It needs to be the kind of preferential category. And as I
Right.
say, slightly making a joke, why did everyone get decide that the AI gets to do music and poetry and I'm still doing the dishes?
Yeah.
And to harness some of that technological innovation
Yeah.
for improving lives.
Yeah.
This is the future edge for politics, for policy, for
Yeah.
kind of, and I and again, for me the conversation has been too much in the shallow end of what
Yeah.
the transformational potential of. Again, we have to assume that we've all collectively reached base camp, because AI can kind of almost, it's like in an undergraduate essay where they write the literature review, and it's very sort of, so and so said this, so and so said that, so and so said
Yeah.
this, so and so said that.
Yeah.
So I would like to argue that essentially that's the value, right? That's the power, is when you start to
Yeah.
synthesize. And
Yeah.
again, synthetic intelligence in,
Yes.
in and also back to, the kind of cognitive potential for really innovative, so intersectional kind of, as you know yourself, your company is
Yeah.
called Innovation Visual. The process
Yes.
by which innovation emerges
Yeah.
is about curious intersections, isn't it? It's about kind of,
Absolutely.
flashes under which maybe if the program can't generate just, it can't
Yeah.
generate. There's no logical way to get out
Yeah.
of this. You
Yeah.
have to go back to being human. And there's been some really interesting books about the nature of what it is to be human that is starting
Yeah.
to be, the kind of books you buy in airports. But there was quite a lot, and I know they get a terrible press now, bless them, the old Corbynistas, but like there
Yeah.
was some of that. So Paul Mason wrote an interesting book on being anti-human, and
Yeah.
and that was genuinely kind of trying to think this stuff through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm kind of fairly persuaded by it is time for a bit of a reckoning about, we don't want humanity to be a residual category of logic and
Yeah.
computing.
Yeah.
We want it to be its own.
Same thing. Yeah.
It
I think you're also touching on the fact that if we bring it back to a marketing sphere, it's not simply about creating baseline marketing content. It's actually about now, what can we do to go beyond? What can we do as marketers, as communicators, to
exactly.
go to give people more? Because it's going to be harder to differentiate yourself in the market if you are just using the churned out stuff. You've got to
Exactly, because you could
you've
probably,
got to use that for the go from beyond that.
exactly. And this is being very unkind mentioning boilerplate. We've all I think this is the another real phenomena, which is the sheer noise of messages that hit us every day. It's the things that matter the most, as I've said. It's not communication, it's comprehension. And it's not more all the time. It's salience. It's finding trusted
Yeah.
intermediaries to lead you through content to find what you need. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry if that sounds a bit vague, but like that trust is the ultimate human premium at the moment, being a trusted voice.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know,
I think
again, if you aren't taking into account if you're trustworthy and if you
yeah.
can be believed, because you can be, the thing is there's an amazing kind of democracy about all our lives being online. It does create quite a crazy transparency. And
Well, transparency, but also actually it creates a veil of unreality, doesn't it? In terms of
well,
that, what people decide to present online. You talk about the persona you see on LinkedIn, and we all know about the personas that we see on Instagram. You know, people post pictures of their exotic holidays. They don't post pictures of them unloading the dishwasher.
no.
And the fact that the dog's done something on the carpet that it shouldn't do. But I think that this brings in like with AI, my view is that actually what you said is trust is actually, we can use AI for mechanics and we can use AI to make ourselves more efficient, but what we need to do is we need to actually have more emphasis on the trust factor
Yeah,
and on the, as you say, the salience, the specificity, the engagement. But what we need to do is we need to actually have more emphasis on the trust factor
yeah.
and on the, as you say, the salience, the specificity, the engagement.
I mean, it's fascinating. I don't know if you got a family, but dealing with the way in which younger humans ingest media is amazing, right? So, some of my godchildren are so lived online. Again, the kind of matrix quality of
Yeah,
the fact that most of them, depending whatever they're, so one of my godchildren's really into makeup, so she watches makeup tutorials on
yeah,
YouTube, and then normally she'll watch someone narrating over the tutorial.
yeah,
It's like another, so there'd be an expert talking over.
yeah,
It's like the DVD extras all the time. One
yeah.
of my godchildren's really into Minecraft, and we sat, no joke, after Christmas waiting for a concert that virtual Eminem was going to do in Minecraft to launch the new skins in Minecraft, with
Wow.
his parents and I all just, is this like queuing outside a nightclub in the 90s for a superstar DJ? And
Yeah.
then an avatar, and then it crashed the internet because the entire world wanted to see an avatar
Wanted
of
to say.
Eminem. and
Yeah.
and what was interesting was that they know, I mean, if you're into Minecraft world, or anyone is like,
No.
it's a completely parallel universe, but wow, it gets back to the old dad's credit card very quickly. So if you're in a queue that might take 3 days, you can assuage your need for entertainment with all kinds of purchases on the way, and that's coming out
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
real economy. It's very, very, very interesting that. And I
Yeah.
guess, I mean, I always, I knew, speaking to you, Tim, that this would end up talking about high brow continental philosophy, but essentially the sort of simulacra and simulation of sort of Baudrillard's world seemed quite fanciful in the 90s, partly, but the technology is now caught up, and
Yeah.
this notion of kind of real unmediated reality
Yeah.
is what Baudrillard was telling us was, we haven't had it since the printing press. It's just felt like we've had more to hang on to, and
Yeah.
these new models start to bring
Yeah.
and again, a conversation
This.
about the nature of reality needs to be in the forefront of the
Yeah.
minds of people that are, even if you're seeking, selling soap is about the future of reality. Any transactional work is going to
Yeah.
depend on trust. It's going to depend on honest brokers. Going to depend on whose voice you listen to, because the louder it all gets,
Yeah.
the tactics don't work anymore, and it needs to, for me, the value prop is it's far more bespoke, far more individualized,
Yeah.
and in a sense far less replicable. And
Yeah.
if anything, the kind of, again, humanity is not a residual category.
Yeah.
Humanity is a value proposition
Yeah.
under which trust, empathy,
Yeah.
digital sherpas, kind of,
Yeah.
concierge work,
Yeah.
brokerage. Again, I'm not sure you get these modules in business school, but
No,
this is a value
they need to be
proposition
done.
of extreme value.
Yeah. Just I know we're probably getting short on time. I want to change the discussion around AI slightly to more macroeconomic factors. One of the things I've heard, and I don't know of your opinion as an economist, is that the one of the issues that they're seeing with, or they think may happen with AI, is the wealth that may be earned by humans moving to a small number of technology corporates. So if we look at Microsoft's share price, which obviously OpenAI within their stable is now gone right up. If you've got the people who were going to get paid to write the boilerplate and they're no longer doing that, but their money is now flowing into these AI powered giants, how do you think that's going to affect the wider macroeconomic situation? Because computers don't buy food, they don't go to the cinema, they don't
They
buy
don't.
clothes to wear.
Well, I mean, the sort of cop-out answer is God knows, but we're in an amazingly transitional, fluid space between. And again, what I would, having said the thing before about this category, it doesn't really matter for category B, right, which is essentially capital. It matters a lot for category A, which is essentially labour. Now, you know, again, you did these seminars as an undergraduate under which the sort of labour theory of value was espoused, and presumably, since you live in symbolic value, you didn't find it particularly compelling. Because, as you know very well, you know, cotton plus machinist plus box plus transit equals X. All of that plus crocodile on tit equals a completely different X times X. You know, the brand is the commodity. So, yeah, again, we're not this is another conversation that I think is useful to have, right? It's about some of these shifts are so fundamental. And again, another bit of reading that I did recently was if you read Techno-Feudalism by Yanis Varoufakis. Now he's coming from a very specific place again. And I tell you what, so I've mentioned Paul Mason and I mentioned Yanis Varoufakis. So there's very, very interesting things happening on the broad left in terms of trying to think through, because of course, if your sort of master category is the worker as a unit or the firm as a unit of analysis, neither of which I find particularly helpful anymore in terms of like, they're sort of, in some ways, it's rare that you see either one thing in its kind of pure form. But if we're all hybrids, exactly, we are all, this is cyber psychology, we are all machines now and all the rest of it. But the point is, so what Yanis argues in this book is that cloud capital is the kind of, as you say, that's tech money. And he argues that there's a whole class of people called cloud-alists who sit outside of countries, who sit outside of kind of regulation of any kind, who are the only people that benefit from all the symbolic value being generated in the current economy. And again, I'm not suggesting the politics of this is simple by any means, but if we reform our categories and we take that stuff seriously, it helps us to understand certainly some of the absolutely egregious economic inequalities and patterns. And again, so everything post-pandemic has sped up everything that was kind of, the die was cast post-banking crisis. And I have argued elsewhere that the economy is fundamentally K-shaped, right? And if you just, so the flat line is there, that's the average. And when you look at anything, whether it's wages per hour or share value, the up leg of the K, that's your Microsofts and your, you know, AI tech stocks.
Google, DeepMind,
exactly. And that is very frontier and very kind of, and actually the ways in which those, so in some ways the biggest threat to capitalism isn't any form of collective action or socialism or anything. It's monopoly. It's the monopolies that exist in the cloud kind of world, because as you know, there's only maybe 6 or 8 kind of entities got hungry hippoing about gobbling up every small bit of innovation. So they're on the up leg of the K, but the down leg there, so the average means nothing. And I say this a lot when receiving the absolutely appalling interest rate news or inflation news, all of which is just appearing to only exist to grind us all into the absolute dust if we are stupid enough to pay mortgages from wages. Thank you very much, you know, Chancellor Hunt. The K is where it is, right? Little bit of politics there, just in case you weren't.
It's all right. He's been on Digital Marketing Answered, so that's fine.
Yeah, he can get his right of reply somewhere else. But I think he's got enough access to the flaming media, frankly. Right. So your K then becomes your reality. And then the conversation is, well, this is, I mean, it's the global 1%, you know, are the only people on the upswing, and the rest of humanity are grubbing around down here trying to get anywhere near an average. And again, that's why, in terms of GDP, in terms of GVA, these big numbers that economists, you know, take to bed at night and cuddle on their pillows, Averages mean nothing, because if you're not on the uptick of the K in some ways, then you're on the down tick of the K. And that's what I mean about there is some quite compelling work on the left about, well, what are our states for? What are our societies for? If, you know, a lot of the sort of truisms about what is a nation state, oh, well, it's a taxation system connected to an army, you know, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, because you've got these entities which just exist outside of the states, because they're so big that actually they can't be policed by any one state, because all they do is they move their cloud over a different area. And
that's the point. And that's what Giannis is arguing, that the cloudalists are making the weather, you know, and the rest of us are all just in receipt of whatever kind of cloud capital we can kind of scrounge together. It's quite a pessimistic view. But again, like, I just find all this stuff incredibly exciting. And then I feel sad when the conversation is so, you know, we've roved quite widely this morning, you know, through, you know, this needs to be your base, your point of entry for talking about what might happen in your world, right? And
so I mean, we should bring it back to close it on a more positive thing. But we've actually come full circle, and we've come back to VUCA, and we've come back to the whole thing of business and revenue leaders having to look at the wider space, but also looking at the volatility and the uncertainty factor. So how do we?
And if that's not priced in as standard, then your standard model is unfit for purpose, I would say.
So you're saying you should have enough slack, if you like, enough resilience in your business system that if you get hit by shocks, you're not falling over, you're able to continue. But key.
Also arguably that slack might be where your best leap forward comes from as well, because you know, a business model, so again, you know, a Fordist mode of production, which is, you know, tire plus steering column plus car plus roof plus sunroof, all that stuff, assembling components, right, hasn't been where value has been created since the 70s or even before then. As I say, your category A functions are being a car maker. Your category B is where you put your money, how you pay your workers, how, you know, all the sort of, as I say, the governance of your assets is in some ways far more important than what you do in your category A. And that's a hard lesson for people in business, because and again, people cling to sort of sector phenomena, you know, and largely those things can be pity parties at the moment, like, oh, it's been so awful for hospitality. Yes, and you're right. AI does not drink a cocktail that costs £22.60 and tip and get an Uber home. Oh, God forbid, ride a horse home. You know what I mean? It's like there's all this transactional stuff in the real economy is hard to explain the value prop if and when, you know what I mean? It's like, and we see it all the time in our city centres. You know, as I say, you know, if I'm an expert in anything, God forbid, it's in the way in which cities change. And we're seeing cities, it's very, very odd. You get sort of bubbles of busyness, but you can't really predict it. So you know yourself, like, more flexibility for the workforce. You know, on a Monday, you might have, oh, I've got 60 cinnamon buns here that I want to sell for 4.5, because that kind of calf never has zeros on the end, as you know, 4.5. I might sell out on Monday and I'm left with them all on Tuesday. So then do I have to alter the price to cover the fact that, you know, you've then got to think, okay, well, exactly, and that's it's the unpredictability then. So it's not like I always laugh. My granddad, he always got the same train back from Marylebone to his house, the 5:27. And so that level of predictability, you know what I mean? He would walk to the train and get on the train. Now, of course, in the sort of 60s and 70s, you weren't stopping at Pret every 30 seconds. But you could set your watch to that. You know, if you needed to sell him a whatever, you know, you're in Marylebone Station with whatever on that at 5:24, and you're going to make a sale. Now, you know, the commute just feels like tyranny. And everybody's seeking more and more flexibility to get round, essentially, our complete failure to invest in infrastructure to make our transport system work at all, which again
Yeah.
is one of the main reasons that you have the state, is to underpin,
Yeah.
Railways and motorways. I mean, anyone that wants to hire me and I'll tell you how. That's
Yeah. That's the thing.
And
Okay.
the relationship between spending on infrastructure, like Biden is doing at the moment, and
Yeah.
then subsequently growth down the line. This
Yeah.
is a very well trod path for having a successful place. But what do I know?
Yeah.
Apparently, austerity is brilliant, and cutting your
Yeah.
way to growth is definitely. I mean, it's really working out there. Apologies. What was the
Okay.
thing I said? Yes, VUCA suggests
Yeah.
though that it's like you're not going to sell anything on Monday. You're not going to sell anything on Tuesday, but you're going to sell more than you've ever sold on Wednesday. Are you ready for that? And then on
Yeah.
Thursday, God forbid, you're not going to sell anything again, rather than
Yeah.
you're going to sell 16 of these Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And that is down again. This is very, very micro stuff. People find it really, prosaic to talk about this, but these are the millions of decisions that then get stacked up and called the economy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, where we're operating as marketing and revenue leaders, is in this decision. What do we do? How do we get out? How do we navigate the uncertainty? I think it's been a really good discussion. I feel like we could probably carry on, but I know you've got things to do today. But no, I think that's really interesting. I think it's given people a lot of thought to actually go outside of their business bubble and actually consider these big, wider things. What's going on? How the interrelationships between humans and machines, the interrelationships between what's going on in the big wide world, and how that does actually filter down to the difficult decisions they make on a daily basis.
And there's power in feeling. I mean, you'd be mad to think that you had a handle on everything that was happening. It's just not possible. But you can back up very operational decision making with there's an endless stuff. Again, we're in a world of noise. If you want to find out about these things, you've got a business school in your pocket. If you've got the basic, and this is another thing, you need these digital natives coming behind us who are used to being able to find 10 sources in that many seconds.
Yeah.
Use that as your base camp, but push on to the summit is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a really good phrase to leave it with and to close it off. Thank you for those people watching or listening, depending on what platform they're on, to Digital Marketing Answers. Please do provide comments, reviews, and like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'd like to say thank you very much for a really interesting discussion, Dr. Nicola Headlam. It's been fantastic, and thanks to everybody who's been listening. See you on the next episode of Digital Marketing Answered.